I look forward to the day where we can all come together and not have to worry about having to do this on Zoom. We can see people live, as somebody just mentioned before, getting a hug. So there are a few people who deserve very special thank yous. First and foremost, thank you to all of you for joining us. It's very meaningful. I know there'll be quite a few homes who, even though it was last minute, this was arranged relatively last minute, but please God, this will also go out via Facebook, and then we send out the link to thousands of people that will be watched. So the impact of this is a lot more than just right now. The impact of this is going to be as we move forward. Thank you too. I'm just turning my Zoom off. There are a couple of people that I wish to give a very special thank you today. And if I may, I'm going to begin by thanking the Kirschenbaum and Glassell families. This is something that Alan Kirschenbaum and family, Stacy and the entire family have had the history of the Holocaust within their family and wanted very much to perpetuate the future and to remember them, and not just to call it like Holocaust or something sad, but a survivor series, an initiative, something to keep the flame alive. And as long as we have, and thankfully we have, those who are experienced it and are alive with us today and can share their story and have written books, we will share that story and be proud Jews and feel united and together that we can learn from it and be wholesome and healthier and better and make the world a better place because of it. So to the Kirschenbaum and Glassell families, thank you for this. We're going to be planning to do a lot of things for the Survivor Series initiative. And one of them is the Hannah's Survivors series where she has them speaking. Also, Hannah's going to give a very special thank you to Michael Bornstein and his daughter, Deb, and to the entire family for agreeing to do this and for sharing what must be very painful every time you share it. But at the same time, it not only allows the memory of your parents and all those that were lost, all the family members that were lost and all those that were lost to remain alive, but also to give us an appreciation of how blessed we are today and what we have to do and our mandate and our responsibility going forward. And last and certainly not least, a little bit of nepotism here, a very special thank you to my beautiful bride, Hannah. And the reason is, I'm going to give a big round of applause. You can join me. And the reason is because even though we both, I actually recently found out that I had quite a bit of family who were in different camps, but her grandparents came over from the Russian part and didn't really experience that. Well, your grandmother did, your Vienna, they did. But bottom line is, every time Hannah reads a book, she feels like she's there and she feels like she has to reach out to the people. And you know, Hannah, she doesn't take no for an answer. And no matter how long it takes, she finds the people, reads the books, and she wants them to share their story. She becomes one with them. So a very special thank you for your determination. And thank you for those on the receiving end of this who not only respond and say yes, but also very much are willing to do what's necessary to share this beautiful, heart-wrenching, strong, powerful message. So to all of you, wish you a beautiful day. Thank you, Michael. Hashem should bless you with long life and good health. And nachas from the kinderlach. We should be able to give you a big hug very soon after our shots. And until then, we'll have a little shot of l'chaim for you. Cheers, everyone.
Okay. Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you very much. So, as the Rabbi mentioned, I feel compelled to read book after book of the survivor stories, specifically the ones that I can get to meet in person. Eli Wiesel said that when you hear a witness, you become a witness. So everybody that is here today, we are all witnesses. We're going to hear Mike's story through his amazing daughter, Debbie, who took on the task of sharing his story once he was ready to share the story, which was not right away. It was actually after an incident that happened, and they may tell us that he decided he saw the importance of sharing and went to his daughter, who was able to share with all of us. And so all of us here are going to be witnesses, and all of the people that will be watching later on Facebook will be witnesses, and hopefully we'll share this with the youth who will pass this on to the next generation. So I just want to thank Michael and Debbie. And I want to say that I have been looking for both of you for months. You are in New Jersey local. I found survivors in Israel. I found survivors in France. I found survivors around the world, but I could not find your contact information. And I thank Eric actually in our office when I told him, I said, Eric, I've been looking for them for such a long time. And Eric has worked with the Holocaust Council and said he knows of your names, and he looked you up, and that day I called the number that he gave for Michael, and I recognized the voice because I've watched YouTube after YouTube after YouTube video of you speaking of your life. And we're going to watch a couple of those videos today, some on YouTube and some on actual websites of the book. But I recognized your voice on the answering machine, so I didn't hesitate to leave a long message, and was really, really honored to hear back from you, and then the three-way call with Debbie. So I'm going to start by giving a small introduction to Michael and to Debbie, and then I'll show a short little video, and then I'll hand you over to them to tell us their story. So what I'm reading for you is the back of the book. I'm going to start and end with this, but the program, the Survivor Series, actually started as an opportunity to meet the survivor and to buy a signed copy of the book. And we did that in person in the shul, where people would come and hear the survivor speak, and then they would get a signed copy. Once we went to Zoom, it wasn't always possible to get a signed copy, but Debbie is telling us that it is possible. So I'm just going to share with you, and Debbie will tell us how to, if you would like a signed copy, then you can send $25 to Debbie's Venmo. That will include the book and the signed book and the shipping, which is a lot today. And you would send it to her, and you would put in your name that you want, I guess, you want written, and the address, and then they'll send the signed copy to you. So Debbie will tell you how to do that. But right now I'm going to read just a little intro to Michael and Debbie, and then I'm going to share a quick video, a fascinating video with you. So Michael Bornstein immigrated to the United States 6 years after his liberation from Auschwitz, when he was 4, a young little child at the end of the war. He graduated from Fordham University, earned his PhD from the University of Iowa, and worked in pharmaceutical research and development for more than 40 years. Now retired, Michael lives with his wife, Judy, who we are honored to see also on the screen. Hi. They lived in New York City, I guess in New Jersey now, and speaks frequently to schools and other groups about his experience in the Holocaust, which we so appreciate that you're sharing your story. Thank you. And Debbie Bornstein Holinstat is a third of Michael's 4 children, a producer for MSNBC News. She lives in New Jersey. Debbie worked with her father for 2 years to help him research and write his memoirs. A lot of work and time and effort went into that, and I can tell by the information that's in here. So thank you for that. Although she has grown up hearing many of these stories her entire life. So thank you. So I'm going to share a video with you. Before I show it to you, I am going to tell you just the video is about a reunion that Michael had with 2 of the little girls on the front cover after Debbie put this book out. Once the book was out, 2 of the girls that were on this cover saw the picture and said, wow, somebody else is alive from this picture. And there was a reunion. But I do want to share with you that there is a boy from our Hebrew school, Scott Bornstein. He was a student last year, and his mother, Jillian, has been telling me that her aunt, I'm just going to show, her aunt was Sarah Ludwig, was one of the little girls on this famous picture that is from Auschwitz. And last night I put 2 and 2 together, and I sent her a message. I said, is it possible that this is the picture you're talking about? And she said, yes. And she sent me a picture of her and her aunt, for those of you that know Jillian. And this is the video reunion that we're going to see. So the world is so small. The fact that we had a student in our Hebrew school last year whose great aunt, shared this experience with Michael, who we're going to hear the story from today. She unfortunately will not be able to be sharing her story, but through Michael's story, we'll be able to hear the story of many survivors, of all of the survivors that so many that we've lost, and we only hear it from those that are here to tell it to us, and that's why we appreciate this so much. So let me just quickly get the video set up for you and then share the screen with you. Okay, I have it open now. I've got to go back to the Zoom. Share screen. And here it is. Okay. All right. Can everybody see? Okay. Volume's up. Okay.
It's one of the haunting images of the Holocaust. Children freed from Auschwitz.
We are the witnesses.
This little girl, Tova Friedman, was just 6 when her mother did the unthinkable.
She hit me with a dead body, and she told me not to move.
Sarah Ludwig, just 4 in this video.
I was a very gutsy kid. I was able to survive. Don't ask me how.
This is Michael Bornstein and his grandmother.
My grandmother hid me in an quote-unquote infirmary.
He finally told his story in a book, never knowing the 2 girls at his side then lived just a few miles away today.
So the moment I saw the book, I said, oh, there is somebody from that picture alive.
Hi, how are
This week they reunited.
Look, I've had this picture for years, and I've always wondered, where are the other people?
Oh my goodness, that's me.
Yeah, that's you.
and that's me.
72 years after they were last together.
I just
No,
want to
no.
hug you guys. Can we hug? It's such a long time.
In 1945, we were there.
Just like this.
Just like that. We were standing next to each other, and we made it.
I'll show you my tattoo. We would
It's
probably
delve in our memories forever.
Now they're sharing happier times, children and grandchildren, which leads to one more connection.
She was the first grade teacher of my grandchildren.
Brought together by a book, forever bound by history. Finally, getting their chance to celebrate survival.
Nice.
Kristen Dahlgren, NBC News, North Caldwell, New Jersey.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our
Wow. Powerful. Okay, so Debbie, I'm going to pin your screen up here. And Michael, I'm going to pin your screen. We'll spotlight. And then Michael. Let's see how I do this. Hold on one second.
It'll probably, whoever is the primary speaker, it'll probably put us in the box anyway. So
Oh, okay. But then if somebody makes noise, what happens with that is that if someone makes noise,
I
sometimes.
think everyone's muted. Everyone else is muted.
Okay. It's just the add spotlight. Okay, so you're both on here. Okay, perfect. Okay, so I'm gonna hand you over to Debbie now. And thank you, Debbie, so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Actually, Dad, are you unmuted now? I'll let my dad go ahead.
Can
Dad.
you hear me okay?
We can hear you, Dad.
Okay. I'll go ahead and start. First of all, Hannah and I had a discussion before, and if I remember correctly, we both share the same mama in Yiddish. Is that true? Is that true, Hannah?
Yes, yes. Ich rede Yiddish.
So, and we'll talk later on about our trip to Auschwitz, and we had a chance to share Yiddish with a lot of survivors, and we'll talk about that a little later. But again, I want to thank Hannah Solomon for working so hard to track me down. I know it's difficult, and for reading my story, the story that Debbie wrote, and I just want to tell you that she's a wonderful writer. I don't know if I ever mentioned it, but I do like to mention it. She's also a producer at MSNBC.
Covered that.
Okay. This is probably the first time we've talked in a very long time because of the pandemic, and we've had a chance to take a break from speaking. But Hannah, as you heard before, is very, very persuasive and got us to talk. The truth is, I know that we should get back to this. And anyone who's watched the news lately, and Debbie watches it very, very often, know that there are white supremacists who've become very, very vocal lately and organized in this country. And that's particularly scary for me. I also know that dozens of Holocaust survivors have died this year because of COVID-19. There are fewer people left to share the stories, so I'm here to tell you mine, even though, as it was mentioned before by the rabbi, it's difficult for me to talk about it. For most of my life, I hid my tattoo that I have on my arm. I live a happy life now. My wife, Judy, is right next to me. We've only been married for 53 years. We have 4 wonderful children, and Deborah is one of them. And we have 12 terrific grandkids. But if I don't continue to tell my story, I worry that the Holocaust and the experiences will be forgotten. I was prisoner B1148. I think you've seen my tattoo before, and you've seen many tattoos before, but I'll show it anyway. At 4 years old, I wore a prisoner uniform. I was starving, too malnourished to grow hair, and I would find potato skins in cans and use those to eat. And there were bed bugs and rats everywhere. I was ripped away from my mother, my father, my big brother Shlomo, and after the war, I was sick, I was bullied, and at one time, I was sexually assaulted. People always ask what I remember. My memories of Auschwitz are faint because I was 4 years old, but I do seem to remember the smell. It almost smelled like burning flesh. And sometimes when I close my eyes, I hear boots marching and shouting in German. As an adult, I get nervous riding crowded New York City subways and thinking about that cattle car ride to Auschwitz. It's not easy to talk about it, but if the haters and deniers are making noise in my country, I need to talk louder. I need to be clearer, and I need to be stronger. I'm telling my story today because no one can ever forget what happens when discrimination of any kind is ignored. So thank you all for listening today, and I hope you'll read my book. Again, you heard how you can get a copy, a signed copy, work it out with Deborah, and help me ensure that no one forgets what happened to my family and the 6 million who were murdered simply because they're Jewish. And now, Deborah, you have a few words?
I do, but in the interest of trying to get to the like tell your story as quickly as we can, because there's so much that I want to like get through today. I'll just really quickly just say that I'm grateful to Hannah too. I totally am like your soul sister in being never stopping till you get what you want. So I appreciate that you found a way to drag my dad down.
Debbie's very good at that too, by the way.
Yeah, strong arming is my specialty. But I appreciate it, especially now more than ever, because I really I feel very strongly that time is running out. I think the next couple of years is going to determine whether or not the Holocaust becomes just like a little footnote in history that people that's barely taught, or whether it's something that we remember. And fewer and fewer survivors are here. It's getting pushed to the background with every year that passes, Holocaust education. And I just really appreciate that you guys are here on a Sunday afternoon. I appreciate it even more after literally this morning, my 11-year-old said to me, she's learning about the Holocaust in school now, actually. They're doing like just a short little lesson on it. And she said, Mom, I won't use the name, but one of the kids in her class said that she doesn't believe the Holocaust really happened. The Holocaust was real. And I said, what did the teacher say? She's like, oh, well, the teacher didn't hear. But it's scary. That scares me very much. In my nice, safe, upper middle class, well-educated community, that there are kids who appear to be learning that it terrifies me. And so I'm really grateful for opportunities like this, any opportunity like this. So sorry about the dog in the background, by the way. She has made herself at home here in our talk. But anyway, with that, I'm gonna share my screen and let's see if this works. Hold on 1 second. Share. Can you guys see what's on my screen now? Yeah, okay, great. Okay, make this bigger. Okay. And that's my dad there, as you can see, but we'll take you through his story now in pictures. Go ahead, Dad.
Okay. And this is before the war. My father, Israel Bornstein, was a successful accountant. My mother, she's on the left, and her stage name was Naomi, and she loved to dance and sing. And you see on the bottom right, picture of our family. My mother is in the far right there. And we had a big extended Orthodox Jewish family.
Yeah, they were modern Orthodox, as you can see by their clothes. They were more modern a version of Orthodox Jews, but incredibly religious, and nonetheless. And my grandma Sophie, who you see on the right, stage name Naomi, she had 6 brothers and sisters. It was a family of 7 siblings. You see her there with some of her siblings, and they were a really tight-knit family.
So this is a picture of Poland, and I was born in a town called Zarki, as you see the bottom central, and right above it is a town called Częstochowa, and we'll talk about Częstochowa a little bit later.
One of the things we learned in the research is that Zarki was one of the first towns invaded when the war started. And within 48 hours, there were boots on the ground in Zarki. Among the atrocities committed on that Monday, just a couple of days into the war, that Monday, September 4th, 1939, is remembered as Bloody Monday in the town of Zarki, and Częstochowa as well had their own version of Bloody Monday. So one of the things they did is they would take the German Wehrmacht, the German soldiers, would take whole families of Jewish people and line them up against a wall, and they would stand there for hours. They would tell them, if you lower your hands, you get tired, you'll be shot. And many people were killed in Zarki at the beginning of the war in that way. It was a town that was actually predominantly Jewish. There were about, I think, 3,500 Jews in a town of a little over 6,000 people. It was, when the German Wehrmacht came in, they were brutal. They were brutal to everybody, but particularly targeted the Jewish people. Now, one of the things that happened early on is my grandma Sophie wanted to go check on her parents, my dad's grandma and grandpa, Esther and Mordka, and she took a shortcut trying to avoid seeing German soldiers. And she took a shortcut through the Jewish cemetery, and she witnessed something that really haunted her for the rest of her life.
Yeah, my mother couldn't stop talking about that. She was hiding behind a tree. She saw a Jewish family and a Nazi soldier. He asked the man to dig a hole. He asked the family, this is a family of a man, a woman, and a little girl. He asked them to strip. He asked them to hug, and he shot them all and pushed them into that open pit. And my mother absolutely could not stop talking about that. So again, I was born into ghetto life, and as you can see, Zarki was an open ghetto where you can go from house to house. I was born May 2nd, 1940. I guess that makes me about 39 years old. But I had a big brother, Shlomo, and there were food shortages in the town.
There was also something called forced contributions, which is just a fancy way of saying stealing. The German soldiers would go door to door on a regular basis and demand certain things. Contributions, they called them, to the German military, the German government. On one given day, you'd have to give them all of your jewelry or all of your leather goods or certain sums of money. And so my dad's family did exactly what most Jews across Poland were doing at that time, and that is that they hid whatever they could. So in their case, they created like his dad, Israel, created like a little makeshift vault in the backyard, reinforced it, and buried jewelry and family heirlooms and a big sum of money. And they really thought the war was going to end quickly and they would have their things and they could return to life. At the beginning, they really felt that way. We learned that my dad's father, here he is, Israel Bornstein, was actually selected to be the head of the Judenrat, the president of the Judenrat. Each ghetto had to have a Judenrat, or like a committee of Jewish people that worked as a liaison between the Nazis and the Jewish people. This was not a coveted role at all. You were like kind of caught in the middle. My dad's father, you know, in a lot of towns, the Judenrat presidents were seen as traitors by their fellow Jews because they were liaising with the Nazis. And so if rules were handed down, really egregious rules were handed down by the German soldiers, the Judenrat had to make sure those rules were being followed and enforced. But I will tell you that one of the best moments along this entire journey of helping my dad write his memoir was when we were able to have some essays translated from Hebrew, written by some survivors in the town. And what they revealed to us is something another survivor who's still alive today shared with us, and that is that my dad's father was actually viewed as a hero in the town. He used his position to create a bribery scheme. And he collected a big sum of money from the community, the Jewish community, and he was using that money to bribe members of the German Wehrmacht. And he was doing it to save people's lives. He obtained travel visas to try to help people escape. And in one particular instance, a survivor who's still alive today, his name is Marvin Zborowski. He's about, I think, 92 years old now. And Marvin shared with us that he, on one particular day, did not show up for work. He was a young teen and he didn't show up for work. He said he was very sick, couldn't get out of bed, and he woke up to a pillow being put over his face, and he was taken to the jail. And the punishment for not showing up was death. And go ahead, Dad. Do you want to tell the best part?
Yeah, Marvin, again, his brother Eli and Marvin started Yad Vashem International. You might have seen Eli's picture that's circulated around even now. But Marvin was on a work detail. One day he probably had a fever. He was probably sick. He just couldn't get out of bed to go to work. Nazis came in, put a pillow again over his head, and took him to jail. And the sentence for not going to work was death. Again, Marvin is alive to tell the story now. And my father came in to the jail, bribed the Nazis, and saved Marvin's life.
So Marvin shared this photo with us too one day. That's him on the top left, this skinny kid up here on the top left. He said this is one of his most prized possessions on earth, as a man with a lot of worldly possessions today. He's done very well in the United States. But he said he cherishes this photo above all. This was his secret class. His dad, Moshe Zborowski, used his secret pot of money to set up a little school, this secret school, so these kids could go to school. And this was his teacher over here on the bottom right, and this was his crush, he said, Sasha, who he loved, and all of his best friends. And he cherishes this photo because Marvin is the only survivor from this photo. Everyone that you see here was murdered, along with his teacher and also his dad, Moshe Zborowski. The bribery scheme that my dad's father had created helped to keep Zarki one of the longest running open ghettos in all of Poland. Open ghetto meaning you could live in your own home and you could travel at least within the town, less restrictions than the more traditional ghettos. But at some point word came down from higher up that Zarki would be made uterine. That's German for clean of Jews. And there was nothing that anybody could do to stop it. They were taken ultimately, my dad and his mom, Sophie, his father, Israel, his big brother, Samuel, and his grandmother, Dora, his dad's mom. They were taken to the Pionki labor camp. And things could have been very bad there too, but for the man, his name, they called him Hauptmann Brent, the man who ran Pionki, was a German civilian who actually had great sympathy for Jewish people, and he made sure that within their barbed wire encampment where they lived and worked, they worked long hours on the factory floor packing bullets for the Germans, but they had all the food that they could want. They had all of the soap and toothpaste and you know, they were treated with decency. But unfortunately, word came down from higher up that in the summer of 1944, Pionki would also be made uterine, clean of Jews, and Hauptmann Brent couldn't stop it.
So this is a picture of the cattle car rides that Jews were herded into and going to various camps. And that's the kind of ride that I took. Again, very, very crowded. You could hardly breathe. From what I told, my grandfather suffocated in one of those rides going to a camp. So this is the entrance to Auschwitz, and what it says is Arbeit macht frei, which means work will make you free. Of course, that's the farthest from the truth, but we had a chance, Debbie and I, my wife Judy, and other family members went to Auschwitz the beginning of last year.
So when you arrive, the first stop is the selection gate, where basically the SS there, they play God. They decide who lives and who dies. And for reasons we'll never fully understand, my father, as a child, was selected to live. He was taken to a children's bunk. Again, we don't, we've talked to historians and archivists around the world to try to understand, what happened. Oh, sorry. Thanks, honey. And I can tell you that pretty much everyone we've spoken to has just sort of shaken their head and explained it by just saying it's a miracle that my father lived and survived the selection gate. But I can tell you that we learned in our research that Hauptmann Brent, that man who ran, the German civilian who ran Pionki, he sent word to Auschwitz when those train loads were headed there. And he said, these are the best train loads of workers in the world, keep them alive. I mean, my dad was a 4-year-old boy. He wasn't working anywhere. But we wonder now whether maybe those cars received, the people in those cars received some extra grace. At a minimum, the prisoners coming in were healthier than probably most of the prisoners who had been arriving for years at Auschwitz, because they had been so well treated and well fed at Pionki. And also, one researcher said that perhaps they just weren't expecting kids on that particular, when those cars arrived, because Pionki was not supposed to have children. Again, Hauptmann Brent looked the other way, but Pionki was a labor camp. There were not supposed to be children kept alive there. So again, these are all our best guesses, but my father was taken initially to a children's bunk. Yes, they had a children's bunk on the women's side of Auschwitz-Birkenau. So at the selection gate, he said goodbye to his dad and his big brother, Samuel. They went to the men's side. He said goodbye to his mom and his grandma. They went to a women's bunk. And my father was taken to a children's bunk in Auschwitz, where he probably would have died of starvation if it were not for the chutzpah, I guess you could say, of my grandma Sophie.
Yeah, my mother tells the story about me being in the children's bunk. Again, I was one of the youngest, if not the youngest, in the children's bunk. We were all huddled, and the older kids were starving too. They took my slice of bread away, and my mother would come in. She'd be beaten over the head, and she showed me the scars that she had on her forehead and share her slice of bread with me. So that's one of the miracles that really saved my life.
At some point, my grandma Sophie was afraid that she couldn't get to my father every day. She couldn't get to him regularly. And so she took another big risk. And one night she smuggled my father out of the children's bunk. She brought him to the women's bunk. And she did it not just risking her own life, but the lives of all of those women. They all could have been killed for hiding a child. And nobody said a word. There was an unspoken code, at least among the women at Auschwitz-Birkenau, that you look after the children wherever you could. And so nobody said a word. My dad, once my grandma Sophie had my dad in her sights, she, was desperate to learn how Samuel, her older son, was doing, and how her husband was doing. And so one day, while working near the electrified fence that separates the men and the women's side, she saw a group of men working, and she begged them, please, to find out how are Israel and Samuel Bornstein doing from Zarki, Poland. Could they find out? And they did. And she learned by the end of the day that they had been murdered in the gas chambers. And my grandma Sophie said that she, at that point, had just had enough. She looked at the electrified fence and she really thought about just throwing herself against the fence. She said she was done. And the only thing that kept her going was knowing that my dad, she still had, a little boy to protect. And so she returned to the women's bunk, and she continued to work. We don't know the exact date. I've never been able to figure out what the exact date is, but somewhere during my father's 6-month stay at Auschwitz, my grandma Sophie was actually selected to be moved out of Auschwitz. She was moved to an Austrian labor camp where she would do the same thing she had been doing at Pionki, packing bullets. She was healthy, and she had little fingers that were good for the kind of work that they did. And so she said goodbye to my father, and she said goodbye thinking she would really never see him again in this lifetime. She left him in the care of my dad's grandma, Dora. There's Grandma Dora. We, on January 27th, 1945, as a result of some amazing miracles, when the Soviets arrived, my dad was there.
Und Doktormengen suchten sich unter ihnen eine bestimmte Kategorie aus. Alle, die Sie hier als Überlebende sehen, sind Zwillinge.
And that's my father there.
Yeah, you see my picture there. And actually, we saw that picture. We lived in Indianapolis. I was working for Eli Lilly and Company. And we saw a movie called The Chosen.
So in the 1980s, my dad and mom went to go see a movie called The Chosen. It's a fictional movie. And in the movie, the two main characters go to see a movie, and they used, in this 1980s film, they used a real news clip, this news clip at the time to show what was happening over in Europe. And my dad was sitting there in that movie theater. Go ahead, Dad.
And I said, that's me. And I was really surprised to see it. It was part of a Chavara group that we had from our temple in Indianapolis. And so I called the producer of that movie called The Chosen. He said, "What do you want?" Well, I said, "I want a star role in your next picture. I didn't give you permission for that." Of course, I was kidding, but he thought I was serious. He wouldn't talk to me again. So Judy, my wife, and I bought a big, huge movie camera, went into the theater and managed the owner of the theater let us take some pictures of that movie, The Chosen.
Of course, now you can Google it anytime you want. You can Google anything anytime you want, and find this very easily. If you type in "Children Liberation Auschwitz," you'll see a million thumbnails that look like this. Years ago, sort of before this journey like officially took off for my father, working on this project, my father and I were on the computer doing just that, Googling "Children Liberation Auschwitz," and we picked the wrong thumbnail. And it took us to, it said, "Do you want to visit the site?" It took us to something called the Cadeau Revisionist Forum. It's a Holocaust deniers website. And it captioned this video. This video shows the lies, the fallacy Jews have been telling, that children were killed on arrival at Auschwitz. It captioned another picture, this picture here, "Pretty healthy children for a, quote, death camp," implying that, you know, again, that the Holocaust had been overinflated or was a lie. And so that was really fuel for my father in the moments where he thought maybe it just wasn't worth the emotional lift of going through this. That's been fuel for him to keep talking. After liberation, my grandma Dora here, where else would she go? Of course, but back to Zarki, expecting to find nobody. And a short time after they returned, my grandma Sophie returned too. She survived the Austrian labor camp. And she never, honestly, her entire life, she never got over the shock that my father was alive. I mean, she really could not believe that they were together again. She also couldn't believe where she found him, where he was living.
Yeah, my mother, again, came back to Zarki. My grandmother, when she came back, tried to go to the house that we owned, and the Polish people wouldn't let us in. And so she found a farm with a chicken coop with a board over the top. And that's how we lived. My grandmother and I lived in a chicken coop over the, after the war. And that's how my mother found us.
My grandma Sophie was a little surprised by something else. I had mentioned that she had 6 brothers and sisters before the war. Well, they all made different decisions about, nobody knew which path was going to lead to safety. And so they made different decisions. One sister started out in the Warsaw Ghetto. Her littlest sister, Hilda, started out in the Warsaw Ghetto. She was in the Majdanek death camp, Skarżuszko, Buchenwald, and was led on a death march out of Buchenwald. Another sister started out in Warsaw and trekked across Siberia, and ultimately got paperwork from Chuni Sugihara and made it all the way to Japan. Some of the brothers thought the safest thing would be to go into hiding in various attics and bunkers around town. And really amazingly, all 7 siblings survived.
They all survived.
And that's why, the book is called Survivors Club. It's not just my father's story. Here are some of them together. This is on the top right, my grandma Sophie after the war. This is her brother Sam and his wife Sesha. And here's her littlest sister Hilda, who was in all of those camps. Sam and Sasha had this little girl, Ruth, and my dad's first cousin. This is my father, by the way. He had suffered such severe malnutrition that he had difficulty even after the war growing hair for a while. His hair would fall out. And as you can see, he, doesn't look so healthy. But his little cousin, Ruth, her story is really kind of remarkable in and of itself. I'll give you like the quick highlights. My father had mentioned that town called Częstochowa, and this is why. So Sam and Sesha decided to go into hiding about midway through the war, before the town was made uterine, clean of Jews. And they were in this farmhouse attic on the outskirts of town, a little village called Bobolice. And this farmer said, I can take you in. He took in several people, but he said, I can't take the little girl, because if she cries and someone's coming through, you know, she wasn't even quite 3 at this point. We could all be caught and we could all be killed. So Sam and Sesha first reached out to a former maid who had worked in their home. And they made arrangements. They were going to pay her for a good sum of money. She was going to take Ruth in and raise her as her own. Well, something felt weird about the handoff. That day, it was actually Marvin Zborowski's brother Eli was with them on that day that they made the handoff to the maid. And he said, something does not feel right. And he insisted that they follow and they watch. And as this woman just plunked Ruth down in the snowbank on the side of the road and walked away, she was totally abandoning her, took the money and left. And so they scooped Ruth up and they brought her back to this farmhouse attic and had to come up with another plan. And I can tell you there were quite a few people hiding in the attic at this point, and they all said that they would never forget that they would be haunted the rest of their lives by the sound of Ruth crying. Ruth used to cry in her sleep. Don't take me from my mommy, don't take me from my mommy, because she knew she was going to be taken away again. She was handed off to a man named Boyanek, who the family knew. He was a bootmaker in town. They had a leather factory and they knew him pretty well. He had several boys. He always wanted a little girl. He said, we'll take her in, we'll raise her as our own. And they did, they loved her very much, he and his wife. But one day, Eli Zborowski, who used to come in and sneak out and check on her, this is actually Eli here, that looks like a farm maiden, right? Like a farm, just a woman, a simple woman on that cart. He used to sneak out dressed as a woman so that no one in town would recognize him. They all knew he was Jewish, of course. So he would sneak out. He stopped for a photo, which is kind of crazy, in his disguise one day, but the photo is pretty amazing to have. And he went to check on her, and Boyanek said, I'm so sorry, she's not here anymore. They got scared that they were going to be caught. And so they left her in that town called Częstochowa, famous for having a big monastery. And nearby are nuns ran a bunch of these orphanages. And they said, we left her outside one, and we know the nuns will take her in, and we're sure she's safe. So Sam and Sesha spent years in that attic, not knowing if their daughter was alive or dead or what became of her. As soon as Zarki was liberated, which I think was January 18th, 1945, they went straight to Częstochowa, and they had some, you'll have to read the book, but there were some pretty remarkable ways that they could prove that she was theirs. They went to get her. When she initially, Sam went in first to get her. They didn't want to scare her and all walk in once. Eli was also there, who's her first cousin on the other side. And so they all went in, and the mother, the nun said to them, you know, just one at a time. So Sam said, I'll go get her. So Sam walks into the room and she starts screaming, you're not my father, you're not my father. She doesn't remember him at all. So Sesha comes in next and she starts to sing. And she sings a little song that Ruth knew when she was a baby, a little girl. And Ruth remembered the song. And she knew that she wasn't an orphan anymore. And today Ruth lives in Florida. She has 3 children of her own, and she is grateful also that and I know her kids are very grateful that her piece of her story is told and remembered now. Back to my father's story. So his mom took him ultimately to Munich, Germany, where there were DP camps set up, and my dad had access to better health care. Go ahead, Dad.
Okay, in Munich, we lived at 64 Agnesstrasse, and we had a one-room apartment, no kitchen, nothing like that. My mother was basically couldn't find work, except she bought nylons and candy and chocolate from American soldiers and sailors and sold them on the black market. So that's how we survived. And I was old enough to understand that she could be arrested, and I would really worry when she came home late at night. So In 1951, February 1951, we got a visa to come to the United States, and it was the SS Stewart. It was a transport ship, right, Deb?
USNS General MB Stewart. Yeah, it's I have the ship manifest. My father has a blank on the name of the ship, and I think probably with good reason. He spent most of that trip incredibly sick, but it's the USNS General MB Stewart.
So I was throwing up for about 7 days and 7 nights. I had a pretty high fever coming into the U.S. HIAS, I think most of you heard, a Jewish organization, took my mother and I in and put us in a basement and until I could get better. And again, Jewish groups really helped. One other thing that helped a lot was CARE. The CARE organization sent us packages in Germany, and I remember the chocolate and other things that we got that I really cherished. So again, in 51, you can see my display. There's a DP there. I was a displaced person, came here as a homeless person with my mother, and then went to PS6. You want to talk about all that?
Here's my dad here, second row from the bottom, second from the left. He's a lot healthier there, you can see. I included this at the end of the book, Hannah. You may remember if you got to the afterword, so before the book came out, shortly before the book came out, my father got a random call from someone who had been trying to track him down also for a long time. She said, I was in your class at PS6, your 6th grade class. Do you remember me? And he thought it was strange that anybody would be trying to reach out to him. They were arranging a reunion, and she wanted to know if he'd like to come. And my mom was surprised that he said yes. She said, you know, my dad always said that literally he was invisible. Nobody ever spoke to him in, you know, those years when he first got here. But he decided to go. And so many of them came up to him and said, you know, we remember you, and we have felt guilt, you know, periodically thinking about this boy that they never stopped to ask his story. You know, some of them said that they knew what that tattoo meant. They had seen the tattoo, they knew what it meant. They didn't know what to say. Others said they just had no idea, but nobody bothered, you know, to ask this what this new boy story was. And I think about that, and I included it because really Survivors Club was written with middle grade readers in mind. And I know when I was in 6th grade, I certainly wasn't bullying anybody. My mom and dad would have killed me. But I'll be honest, I don't know, like, you know, in 6th grade, would I have reached out to the new kid who didn't speak the language well and who dressed differently, didn't have a father, didn't come from any kind of money, you know, the PS6 was a good school district. I don't know. And so I included it hoping that my own kids and the readers of the book would do better than maybe I would have done in 6th grade. Go ahead, Dad.
So in 1957, I became a U.S. citizen, and that was really one of the proudest moments in my life because I could belong, and I still cherish being a U.S. citizen because Judy and I have traveled many, many countries, and I can't think of a better place to live. I know Israel is terrific, but I cherish living in the United States. So in 1958, I was accepted to go to Fordham University. I went into the pharmacy school. My mother at the time was introduced to my stepfather, Chaim, who lived in Havana, Cuba. You saw a picture of Hilda. She couldn't get into the US, so she settled in Havana. And so my mother remarried, moved to Havana. I didn't have a place to stay. Fordham put me up. They didn't have any dorms left, but they put me up in an infirmary with an 8-foot cross in front of my bed. But Fordham they were wonderful. They really treated me well. And then 1965, I got a PhD and I got something else from the University of Iowa, and that's my wife, Judy. She was a special education teacher
Mom,
at,
put your face on the picture. Mom, scooch over.
again, we've been married 53 years. And and again, next chapter, we have 4 kids that you see right there. And
Yeah. Oh, I got to update the number on here. You can tell this slide was made a few years ago, 76 years later. But same number of kids. There haven't been any more babies since this photo. That was the last little one there, Ryan on the bottom. This is what the family looks like now. Everybody 2 years older though. And I include this because, you know, you can look at this photo 2 different ways. You know, from one survivor, there's all of this. What should have been 6 million people were killed. You know, what could have been today? But I also, you know, we look at it and we think from one survivor, there's all of this. You know, this was Pesach 2 years ago. Of course, we did it on Zoom this year. But, you know, we're just feel very blessed and lucky. And I know my dad, you know, people always ask him, you know, they say they're so sorry for what he's been through, but my dad always focuses on what he's so grateful for. He feels so lucky. And when we get together at Simchas, I will say that we have something particularly special that we always include. I had mentioned at the start of the war, the family nervous about having their things taken during the forced contributions. They had created a makeshift vault in the yard. We know the family house was taken back in Zarki, occupied when they returned. But if you knew my grandma Sophie, you knew she was getting her stuff back. So before she left Zarki, she snuck into the backyard one night and she dug literally until her fingernails bled, and she found the makeshift vault. But everything inside had been stolen. Vandals knew that Jewish people were hiding their things, and when the Jews cleared out, they went looking. Everything had been stolen except for one thing.
And that one thing is this Kiddush cup. It, you know, it doesn't look like anything special. It has a ding in it, but it's really meant a lot. It was there for our wedding, bar mitzvahs, bat mitzvahs, and many other celebrations. So we cherish this cup a lot. Another thing that my mother gave me was this watch. And on the back of it, there's a Gimel and a Zion, and it stands for Gam Ze Ya'avor. I don't know if you can
You have to
see.
hold it up, Dick, by your face.
Higher.
Okay. Again, it stands for Gam Ze Ya'avor, which means, you probably all know, it means this too shall pass. So we've talked at numerous schools and so on. Not every day is perfect. And just remember that Gam Ze Ya'avor, and this too shall pass, and look forward to the future.
We say that a lot over the last 11 months, actually. One thing I really wanted to give my dad in all of this research, I wanted to at least be able to find a birthday so we could mark his brother, Samuel. He never even knew what his birthday was, and we never thought to ask my grandma Sophie when she was here. He has no pictures, as you saw, we had no pictures of Samuel. And so you know, it was something I really wanted to find. And I can tell you, when the hardcover, when the book was initially coming out in the spring of 2017, still hadn't found anything. 2 weeks before publication, I was in contact with a researcher in the northern UK who had a connection to this man whose father owned the only photography studio in the Zarki area before, during, and just after the war. And this photographer's son was sitting on a treasure trove of photo negatives never shared before publicly. And long story short, after much searching through a whole lot of negatives, we were able to find this. That's my dad's brother, Samuel. So that is now included in the paperback version of the book, which came out a year later.
Again, Marvin Zborowski knew exactly where the picture was taken, and he confirmed that this is my mother and my brother.
My
and
dad
it
was,
really means a lot to me. We have it on a mantle in our family room here, and it really means a lot to have a picture of my brother.
so we thought that's where the story ended. And then as just bringing it around full circle, as Hannah said, there were more surprises ahead, because 2 months after the book came out, these two women reached out, and the next thing we knew, in June of 2017, there was this amazing reunion here in North Caldwell with Tova Friedman, Sarah Ludwig, and my dad. And, you know, who knows what's next? But, well, actually, I'll tell you what was next. I forgot. About a year ago, someone else who had seen the book, someone who was an Israeli couple, Israeli woman, who then moved to New York City years ago, and always knew there was a cousin who had survived Auschwitz but never knew how to reach him. Through the book, was able to contact us, and we have this. My dad only had that one photo all those years that you saw before of his father. Now he has this one here up on the top left. He has this one here on the bottom right with a bunch of family members. Next to him on the right is my grandma Sophie. We believe they were just dating based on the date the photo was taken, that they were dating at the time. So like so many gifts that, you know, my dad didn't know were coming. Including that visit that he mentioned to Auschwitz last year for the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. My dad agreed to go back along with more than 100 other survivors.
That's my wife there, Deborah, and my granddaughter, Katie. And so we had a lot of mishpacha come with us. But again, we met a lot of different people, a lot of survivors, about 100, I guess, at that time, that spoke Yiddish. Some couldn't speak any English. Some were from Paris. And again, she told us about stories where Mengele beat her over the back, and she still has those scars from her beating.
And I'll show you one of the most amazing moments when we arrived. We got off the plane, and it was a private jet that took all these survivors and some family members to Poland. And you could feel everybody was excited getting to the airport. And then when the plane landed in Krakow, it was like this, I don't know how to describe it. I could like feel everybody's anxiety. The entire plane, you could feel the level of anxiety like shoot up. All these survivors returning to Poland. And one in particular, this woman, Claire Hyman, this was her reaction when we landed and got off of the plane. This is what greeted us. And she was so overwhelmed by the warm welcome that she was overcome with emotion. Oops, sorry, let me go back real quick. Stopped it so I could give her a hug. But that's, her story was amazing. Everybody's story there was amazing. She was 13 years old when she was taken to Auschwitz, and with about 100 other girls from her town, and only 7 survived. Some of them tried to launch an uprising while they were in Auschwitz, these women, and they were hanged for it. She had to take her best friend, Roberta, off of the noose. Her best friend was hung, and she was the one who was responsible for taking her off the noose at 13 years old. Those are the things she saw. This is Jeanette, as my dad said, over here, who became one of like our besties there. She didn't speak any English, she spoke French, but my father and her, everybody spoke Yiddish. You know, they all have this common bond. They all knew the same songs. She was, as my dad said, a victim of Mengele. And I'll play you one last video because this man really touched me with this one account he was talking about. He was a teenager too when he arrived at Auschwitz, about this the embarrassment that has lingered with him.
My cruelest part of coming into Auschwitz, Birkenau, was we were dressed naked, stark naked. I was 14 years old. I wasn't even developed yet. And I was walking with 200-300 men, fully developed. It was my biggest embarrassment in my life to walk around. I had nothing They were fully developed. That was my torture. I guess it's 75 years already, longer. I still remember that.
That story just struck me. These things were kids, you know, and teenagers, and I have 2 teenagers, almost 3. And I just, even those things that seem so little were torture. Sam Braden, by the way, who is such a dear man, his grandson, who was in his 30s, just died of coronavirus. He's still alive today, Sam. And it breaks my heart what this man has been through. And last, I'll just play you one little clip from some coverage of that trip. This is from CBS Sunday morning show, Martha Teichner. This is just a little clip, a 2-minute clip from that, the piece that she did after we got home.
All right, everybody ready? Michael Bornstein has 4 children and 12 grandchildren. He celebrates the occasion survival brought him by raising a dented silver cup. The only family heirloom recovered after the war.
And to us, it means the world.
Lori Bornstein Wolf.
It stands for life before and the life that comes.
The last time Michael saw his brother Samuel and his father Israel was by those same railroad tracks the day the family arrived. They were sent one way to die. Michael, his mother Sophie, and grandmother Dora were sent another and managed to live.
You okay, Dad?
Yeah, I'm all right. Michael Bornstein's family clung to each other.
I've never been here with one of my kids before.
And his daughter Debbie to her daughter Katie.
When people got here, they were like, it was chaos, and they did not know that they would never see their kids again.
It's really sad because I know that here a lot of people would have just said goodbye, and that would be forever.
For Lori Bornstein Wolf, life is not a given.
In a way, I feel like my kids are really lucky, and they should feel really lucky because we shouldn't be here, right? And on the other hand, they do have a big responsibility. They should know this burden.
In 1939, before the Holocaust, there were 16.5 million Jews in the world. Now, just under 15 million. Still, 75 years after Auschwitz was liberated. Outside the only crematorium still standing, 3 generations of Bornsteins prayed together for those they lost and everyone else who died here. Amen.
So thank you again to Hannah, and thank you to everybody on a Sunday for showing up. I think we have time for a few questions, and also I'll let you guys know if anybody does want to get a signed copy of the book. I can mail it to you if you just want to Venmo me at Debbie-Holinstat-1, or if you just look up Debbie Holinstat. I'm the only Debbie Holinstat. I'm the only Holinstat on Venmo. If you Venmo me $25, and in this, on the line underneath, just put your address, we'll mail you a copy, a signed copy, and ship that out to you. So again, thank you. And Hannah, are there time for questions? I know we took a lot of time.
Yes, what I'm going to ask you is just to unshare the screen so that I could get everybody on the screen. We can see as many as we can at a time.
Okay, I
don't know how to put myself. You just do unshare.
I do unshare. Hold on.
You see the screen button, the share.
Yeah.
It's like a red little box by the share.
You know what it is? It's that, let me do this and then I'll see it, I think.
Okay.
Oh my goodness, what am I doing here? Sorry.
No problem. I think you may have to push your escape button.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah.
And then I can do stop share. There we go.
Okay. And I don't know if I can add myself to the add spotlight, so I can be there with you. Okay. And then I'm going to do one more thing here.
That was so meaningful and beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yes, I want to just special. I'm so like literally going from tears to the emotion. I mean, I've read this book and I've read it before months and months ago, and I'm in the middle of it now. So everything that you're sharing and telling, I'm there with you. And I can't thank you for everything that you've done to bring this to light and to make this alive for all of us and for us to hear the stories again and again. And I have been reading so many different survivor stories and of little children. And I believe that many of their paths have even crossed actually with you, Michael. Right now, I don't know if you know him or not, but this is our next speaker, Michael. The lucky child. He was with you. I mean, he was 10 years old and he was in the children's barrack and you were 4. So you probably met each other before. He moved to New Jersey, into Paterson. And he went to high school in Paterson, New Jersey. He lives in Washington. He became a judge, and his life goal was to try to stop other children from experiencing what he did. So he became an international judge where he would go into different countries, El Salvador and different places, and try to stop children from suffering and going through the pain similar to what he went through. But what struck me, Debbie, was that you said that when your father went to school, nobody asked him what their numbers were from. And he said the exact same thing to me on the phone. He said, I went to Paterson High School, and he said, I don't understand why nobody asked me where I came from, what happened to me. He said, my question is, he said, I think they knew, they didn't want to have that guilt of asking, and we did nothing. And we had to hear that story and just be helpless, or whatever it was that they knew, and they didn't want to talk about it. They would rather pushed it under the rug. And this is why we need to hear now, and our children need to hear, and our next generation need to hear, our youth. And I think some of our youth from our community are on here, and they are the witnesses for the next generation. So thank you so much for that powerful share. It wasn't just that you spoke, but you shared everything that you have. You gave us your family, the children. I remember the story with Ruth is that she actually changed her name, became a Christian in her own mind, to Christina, and her life was saved actually because of that. The family's life, right? Because of whoever reads the book will see, but when they try to attack later on, she was able to show and pretend that she wasn't Jewish. They were coming into the homes after the war to kill the Jews that were now living back in their homes. And because she had been living a life of a little Christian girl and knew how to say the prayers, she was able to get on her knees and do the whole thing. And they said, look, we're not really Jewish, and she saved their lives. But what got me crying when I read that part, I literally sobbed, was when the mother came in, and you wrote there, I don't know if that's the exact song, but you said that she sang an alphabet song to her.
Yeah, I don't think it was the one that we all know. I think it had its own tune, but not one that I remember, because it's not one that I know, but she sang an alphabet song to her. Yeah.
Yes, a Jewish alphabet. And I've heard stories of parents or of rabbis or of different people that tried to find the Jewish children, and they didn't know they were Jewish. And when they sang Jewish songs, that they were, Shema, alphabet, any of that. And I've heard those stories as stories, not as real. And when I read this book, it was a real person that you were talking about. And this is how her mother was able to tell her, I'm your mother. And that really got me.
You know what I think?
A lot of it.
Did you read the paperback because I have some added additions in the paperback version, but you have paper, right? Okay. So
I know I have the reunion pictures on the back of here. So
yeah. So also what I find interesting is that Yafa, her daughter, was telling me, so she's now unfortunately in a nursing home. She has late stage Parkinson's and some other health issues. And but I find it interesting that all of her aides call her Christina. Krisha was her name there. It's like she's two people. Yeah. She is a very religious Jewish woman. I mean, she is a conservative Jewish woman, but obviously that piece of her identity is still with her,
But that's one of my biggest questions to God. What did you do? You had these Jews living in these shtetls. You had a life that should have made you smile. I'm sorry to say this, I'm the rabbi's wife, and I'm just putting it out there. And I went to these places. I went on the March of the Living, and I was planning this past year to bring a busload of people with survivors, any survivors that would come with us, to bring our shul, because I think it's so important. But, we question we question God, you know, our Father in heaven, who these were your children, and you wanted them to go to a monastery to forget that they were Jewish. You wanted there to be no more left. Now, are we allowed to question God? We do, right? And we should still love him and say we don't understand him. We have to believe that what he does is for the good, but it's still a question that we have. And, you know, the fact that she was able to continue and have a Jewish legacy after that is amazing, but it didn't necessarily happen with everybody. Not every child found out, you know, that they were Jewish and grew up having Christian lives. Many continue to have that.
Yeah.
So
I've met people recently who just only learned that they were Jewish, who had no idea and didn't know why they knew how to make twisted buttery bread. These are people in Poland who just thought it was the bread that grandma made. You know, they had no idea what the story was behind it. So, yeah, it's we're lucky that my father had family. He had aunts and uncles and a mom, and you know, who were able to teach him, and you know, he had more reason to keep the faith. So
yeah, I do have a quick video that I was gonna share. I think it's a 3-minute. I don't know if I need to or not. Should we do questions first, and then? I mean, people may have questions, and
questions.
Yeah, I think we'll do questions. I'll try to spotlight anybody who wants to, if we are able to ask a question. I'm just looking through here. Some people have their screens on, some people don't. Maybe I will share that quickly if nobody, but I also want to say, Debbie, if you want to, I do encourage you to get the book, and the signed book would be really a treasure to have. So
let's see, maybe I can
write put in the chat.
Yeah.
And you can also text it to me, because I'm going to put it on the Facebook when I share this video. So I'm going to quickly share another video with you. I'm going to open it first. Hold on. Okay. Hold on. Let me just share the screen. Okay. Debbie, can you see? Because I can see you. Can you see the videos?
Yes, I can. Yep.
Okay. I'll play and then I'll open it.
September 1939 is when the Nazis invaded Poland. There was a day called Bloody Monday where the Nazis took Jews and they marched them against the wall, had them hold their hands up, and as soon as they lowered their hands, they were shot. We were sent to Auschwitz concentration camp, and that included my father, my brother, my mother, my grandmother Dora. I was young. I was 4 years old.
My father should have been killed a million times over in Auschwitz. He should not have lived more than 2 weeks like the average child in Auschwitz. He should not have survived in hiding there, but then he should never have survived the death march.
Well, the living conditions were terrible in Auschwitz. Food was very scarce. It was very dirty. If you got some cold soup, it was so smelly you have to close your nose and eat it just to survive. The Nazis, after they killed people by gassing them, they put them into ovens, and the smell of the ovens, something that I believe I remember, and you know, bodies burning. I didn't know what the smell was, but I seem to remember the smell.
I always knew he was a Holocaust survivor as long as I can remember, I guess. I always knew there was a tattoo on his arm. But did he talk about it? Like, really not so much.
When I was younger, I really didn't show the tattoo very much. I was kind of ashamed of it. When I was older, I think the tattoo means something. It's important not to forget. Basically, I hid under straw. My grandmother would hide me. I'd hide wherever I possibly could if we thought the Nazis were coming.
We always wondered, why wasn't he on the death march?
Well, my reaction was it was a miracle that I survived.
I'll just say that
All right.
timing
Go ahead.
and the timing of a particular illness saved my dad's life in Auschwitz.
Die Kinder wurden zu Spezialversuchen zurückgestellt. Alle anderen wurden
My wife and I, Judy and I, were with some friends watching a movie called The Chosen, and they showed my picture, and I was really surprised to see that picture.
Nur Nummern haben sie eingebrannt. Ein Brandmal auf Kinderärmchen.
Our book, Survivors Club, is not just my dad's story, it's the story of our entire family. My grandma had 6 brothers and sisters. It was a family of 7 siblings. One went to Auschwitz, one went to Buchenwald, some went into hiding, one made a daring wartime escape, and yet one by one, they all came home.
My mother returned to our old house in Zarki to find the jewels and the belongings, and everything was gone except this Kiddush cup, and this is a remembrance, a cup that was in weddings, our wedding of our children, bar mitzvahs, and so forth. And so the Kiddush cup basically means not to forget, but look to the future. And this is a watch that my mother gave me, and on the back it has a gimel and a zayin, which means gam ze ya'avur, which means this too shall pass. So my mother was optimistic and always tried to look to the future.
Yes.
You know, I have...
You have use your credit card because your name's on it.
9 and an 11-year-old. And I want my own kids to understand exactly what my dad has taught me and what his family taught him. And that is that no matter how hard things get, Gam ze ya'avor, like my father says, this too shall pass. There's always another day.
Gam ze ya'avor, and things will get better, and look at the bright side, because things will definitely get better.